At times, it's funny how swapping a few things can completely change how you feel about something. A different handguard, a different stock, a different barrel size. All these things can turn one thing into a totally different specimen. A standard AK into an RPK, a pistol into a short-barreled rifle, a battle rifle into a designated marksman's rifle. All these things fill a role somewhere in our game, whereas the longer variant of this rifle was for more stationary actions. This one is for high maneuverability and to keep an edge in close quarter engagements. This is my review of the G&G Armament TR-16-308 SBR Mk.1. The year is 2018. Last year, the ARP-9 released, and it quickly became a standard competition legend, like how the combat machine line was for beginning airsofters. G&G Armament, based in Taiwan, looked to advance on this surge of popularity, a move that would incorporate the M4 body that all airsofters are accustomed to, but with a new caliber layout. G&G moved up from 5.56 to 7.62/308 to bring forth the 308 MBR line. Soon after, a trio of rifles would make their debut, with ambidextrous controls, elongated railed handguards, and revamped internals. These rifles gave players another option for designated marksman's rifles with the AR-10 base they were built on. Then, a year later, a new pair of predecessors made their appearance at SHOT Show 2019. Fast forward to the year 2020, and you'd find yourself here, looking at one of those predecessors. This review begins where we all expect it to, with the box that this G&G product ships out with. As expected with any G&G replica, this cardboard box is not bland by any stretch of the imagination. The company's brand colors surround the packaging, and a backstory of the company can be explored on the back. You could use this to transport the rifle if you'd like to, or read all the features that you get inside, or you could simply open it up and see everything that you get laid out neatly in a styrofoam tray. This package was sent several months before its release to the market, explaining why the contents might differ from other TR-16 SBR boxes. However, first is the paperwork consisting of an American product warranty and a graphic-filled paper manual. This manual will explain the basic controls, the features, and how to clean and maintain this AEG in English, Spanish, French, and in Japanese. Contained in a thin cutout in the styrofoam would be the cleaning/unjamming rod with an older ramrod speed loader located somewhere in the box. The 40-round plastic low cap and the red barrel cap will be the last two minor parts in this package, leaving us with just the Mk.1 SBR AEG to enjoy. The compact feel that G&G Armament was going for immediately shines once you handle this rifle. The receiver area remains exactly the same from the trigger to the controls and the contours on the aluminum body. The lengths of the rail, the barrel, and the shapes of the furniture will be the key differences for this release. Taking the Mk.1 SBR to the scale with an empty plastic 40-round low cap magazine, we get 6 pounds, 7.3 ounces. Swapping to a plastic high cap will save you 0.2 ounces, and the rifle itself weighs in at 6 pounds, 0.9 ounces. The magazines will add on a bit of extra weight, with the high cap magazine being the lighter of the two. Surprisingly, when comparing the SBR and the MBR, the weights of the rifles alone were not too far apart. The MBR was weighed in with a standard aluminum M4 birdcage flash hider, as I no longer own the plastic amplifier that this rifle originally sold with. I attribute the minimum weight difference to the fact that the 16-inch key mod rail on the MBR had numerous lightning cuts throughout, including along the Picatinny rail up top. This may seem like I'm really grabbing at straws, but this is still weight that was deleted that the SBR still hosts on its 7.5-inch M-LOK rail. At the end of the SBR's aluminum outer barrel that wraps a brass 6.04mm in diameter, 304mm long inner barrel, a plastic flash hider is pinned and glued to the 14mm counterclockwise threads underneath. I can't say that I appreciate pins like this that make flash hider removal much more difficult. I understand that rules and regulations in the United States must be followed, but a simple Allen wrench with a little glue over it would have been much more tolerable. The stock flash hider is rather favorable in my opinion, But for those looking at adding a suppressor or a tracer unit to this rifle, prepare your drill bits. You're gonna need them. A side effect to the flash hider's design will also impede you from sliding off the M-LOK rail forward. That might be another nitpick, but I just thought that I'd tell you now so you can plan to work around it later. The flash hider, rail, and the barrel length differ between the Mark I and the Mark II. The barrel on the Mark I is also longer, whereas the Mark II is only 245mm in length. Surrounding the 7.5-inch M-LOK rail on the Mark I would be slots for any M-LOK accessories that you'd like to add on, as well as screw points for direct mounts. All these slots are usable, and the rail is secured onto the trunnion by two 2.5mm Allen screws on each side, and a 5mm cross pin. Altogether, this is a nice rail, with no flex or wobble to mention, and I noticed the unneeded but realistic addition of a gas tube seen inside the rail. The two quick detach sling slots work well with the two slots found on the retractable stock, as well as the aluminum sights on the Picatinny rail. These sights are reused quite a bit amongst the G&G M4 variants, but they do the job in regards for airsoft. The front sight is adjustable for elevation with the use of a dial, whereas the rear sight can be adjusted with the dial on the right side of the base. As I said, these sights will do a job since they're clean and not obstructive, but they can be flipped back down or even removed with the help of a flathead screwdriver or with a key or a coin, so you can replace them with any sight that you'd like to attach onto the rail on the receiver that partners up with the 7.5-inch rail segment on the handguard. Interestingly, the sights on this rifle don't match up if I take a look at their serial numbers, while my older MBR sights do. You can also determine just by the shape of the MBR sights that G&G made some minor changes with the SBR. The front sight might be easier to adjust now, but the rear sight is now void of an elevation adjustment. The aperture of the MBR's rear sight is also much smaller. But moving on to the rear of the SBR, we once again see many changes from the MBR to the SBR, and that translates into weight as well, but not in the direction I initially thought it would. Surprisingly, the MBR has the lighter stock at 12.5 ounces compared to the 12.9 ounce weight of the SBR stock, even with the added features of the MBR stock. Despite the MBR stock having an adjustment lock to secure your adjustment selection in place, and despite the pop-out battery storage, the MBR stock is still lighter, even with the thicker rubber butt pad on. The SBR stock is much more simplistic, with 2 points to push to adjust the stock along the buffer tube's 6 points, 2 steel quick detach sling slots, and a swing down butt pad that pivots on a steel pin. The new shape of the SBR stock does positively affect battery storage, however, and by quite a lot. If you don't mind the few tenths of ounces or the sacrifice of some very minor and commonly unused features, then this newer stock should fare you better. The lockup is much more pronounced with the older stock though. I'd like to point that out. Opening the stock, we can see a small Type-to-Me adapter plugged into Dean's connections. These run to a fuse before leading to an external MOSFET that are all connected by 16 AWG wiring. This MOSFET features dead battery and malfunction detection that will cut you off from firing if your battery dips below a certain voltage, or if the rifle comes across an internal issue. These two features and the Dean's connection straight from the box are great to have, so I'd say this rifle is doing pretty well so far. Taking a look at the receiver, some things are pretty standard here, from the ambidextrous steel sling point sandwiched between the buffer tube and the body, and the dual-sided T-handle that once pulled back will lock the steel dust cover rearward, exposing the HopUp. This is a plastic HopUp housing with a rotary style dial that clicks as it's adjusted, just like the HopUp found in the MBR, and in most G&G Armament M4 variants. Looking into the HopUp and spotting the bucking, I can see 2 points that will make contact with any fired BBs. This should help backspin, and the spring pushing the HopUp assembly tightly against the front of the gearbox and the nozzle should help with air seal. I may have skipped around by breaking down this rifle to show the HopUp, but when the rifle is together, you can just hit either bolt release to close the rifle up. Don't expect the polymer dust cover to seal up the bolt though. Neither my MBR's or my SBR's cover will stay closed. The nubs that would keep them closed are just too short to do their job. To wrap up the rifle's controls, the magazine and bolt release controls are ambidextrous and rather large on both sides, and the selector switches have been shortened down to 45 degrees instead of the 90-degree throw that we're all normally accustomed to. I'd say that you should get used to this since it's quite easy to mix up semi and full auto in game, or you can use the electronic trigger unit inside this rifle to turn full auto into 3-round burst by holding down the trigger for 10 seconds in semi, so you can restrain yourself from firing long full auto streams. The trigger system in this rifle is another great strength, since 3 to 5 round bursts are becoming more favorable in today's airsoft climate. Don't like full auto? Then turn it into 3-round burst or 5-round burst. It's pretty easy to do. The trigger itself, being metal, straight, and hooked at the end, is another nice trait in my opinion. All these controls may be a copy and paste from the MBR, including the absence of the admittingly useless Mach forward assist, but that's not a bad thing at all. It's actually welcomed. And completing our external look is the motor grip that's now slimmer than on the MBR. I see the SBR as a rifle for quicker paced players, so the slimmer and lesser grooved option fits this rifle well. However, expect to feel the heat from the motor grip a bit more, since the motor grip's walls are thinner. Apart from the grip, this receiver is just reused, like I expect it to be. Even the trademarks look exactly the same. It technically doesn't say SBR anywhere on this rifle, but that might be because this was an early release sent to me so I could put together this review. As for wobbly parts, the stock rocks side to side a bit. Wobble between the aluminum receiver is non-existent, and the magazine only has slight gap between the mag well. Not enough for the magazines to drop freely, but enough to make extraction easy enough. The controls were tight, with only slight play in the selector switches. Next I pulled out some tools and got to work pulling the G2H gearbox out and apart. Removal of this pre-upgraded G2H gearbox was about the same as any standard version 2, apart from a plastic spacer behind the shell that fills the space between the gearbox and the very rear of the lower receiver, and the right side bolt catch that covers a shell screw. Inside I saw about the right amount of lubricants applied to the major working parts. I like the bridges over the rear of the shell that kept the wiring down, and here we can see a single O-ring around the piston. A single port can be found towards the rear of the cylinder, but there will be no ports through the piston head. The air nozzle has also been equipped with 2 O-rings inside, as well as the metal cylinder head that ships with the G&G branded sorbo pad. Taking a look at the piston's 15 metal teeth and the tracks, I see no wear of any kind. Here we can note the angle of engagement. The polycarbonate tappet plate is straight without any wear, even though about 1,000 rounds have already been put through this rifle. And the space between the metal trigger and the electronic trigger unit's activation is fair. Each gear was accompanied by shims, and found in the gearbox shell would be 8mm ball bearings to assist in spin. Then to complete the internals, the steel mainspring is linear, and the steel spring guide bears 4 tabs to hold itself tightly in the gearbox. Technically, this gearbox is ready for quick spring changes, but having to tear down this gun to this point doesn't make anything too accessible in those regards. The long type Ifrit 25K motor is a nice way to power this rifle, however. The switch here would be responsible for this rifle's last big trick. Once your magazine runs dry, or as soon as the magazine leaves the magwell, this rifle becomes inert. You won't be able to dry fire this rifle thanks to G2 Gearbox's empty mag detection, and thanks to this tab that can be found on all G2 G&G Armament midcaps. The only way to negate this would be to manually push this switch, but I can't really think of a reason to do this apart from testing the rifle or to make absolutely sure that your rifle's HopUp is clear of BBs. While on the subject of magazines, these will be the most common mags for this 308 rifle series. These are the same magazines that could be had with the MBR, and I'm happy with this. These mags hold exactly 40 rounds, they look great, feel great, and get many compliments from fellow players, or at least that was true while demoing this rifle at fields during the production of this review. Thanks to the transparency of this magazine, you can witness your ammo count that's partially hidden around the more appeasing dummy 308 rounds. The extended follower would be the last major advantage of this mag. Nothing is wasted when you release one of these after the rifle stops firing. When the magazine is empty, it truly is empty. The high capacity magazine looks awfully like its lower capacity brother, apart from the transparency and its inner function. These are listed as 370 round high cap magazines, and after counting myself, that seems to be about right. Both of these magazines fed fine. Actually, the low cap magazine fed wonderfully, even with this rifle's higher rate of fire on full auto. I had no hiccups. Not being able to use any other magazine besides the ones made specifically for the 308 rifles is quite damning though. Not many people are jumping for joy when the word proprietary is uttered, and these magazines can sell for $15 each. This is something to be aware of. Heading to Mission Airsoft in San Antonio, Texas, and switching on an Ace Tech chronograph, I found out that even with the shorter barrel's length, this would not be a suitable rifle for CQB games in most United States arenas. .2 gram BBs gave me low 400 feet per second readings. .28 gram BBs gave off 350 feet per second readings. And .32 gram BBs ended things off at around 320 feet per second. Rate of fire was smooth and higher than normal at 22 rounds per second, and the 40 round midcap put those rounds out without any misfeeds. Taking a cardboard box a bit larger than a normal human head and mounting the SBR as securely as I could to a table 7 feet away, groupings were good even with a slight breeze with a bottle of .28 gram BBs. They could have been better if I was much more planted to the table, but what can you do without a clamp holding you down? Taking that same box and placing it at 50 feet, the breeze couldn't hurt my shots too much at this range. With heavier BBs like .32 grams, this will be even easier. So for a man-sized target, you'll have no problems. At 100 feet, the breeze became much more evident. I'm curving BBs a bit, but I can still hit the target multiple times. It's not bad, but it's not the best out there. But again, if you're facing a man-sized target, you should have no problem. Getting back in the car and heading to my friend Jaime's studio, I was ready to get the last bit of information. Just how loud is this rifle? -3 decibels was the reading for each of the 5 shots I put through Jaime's equipment, and not the more booming bellows that shorter barreled rifles put out. It was a bit of a surprise, but a welcomed one. These readings were made with an SM7B microphone with a Scarlett 18i20 interface, running to a Golden Age Pre-70-3 and a Pro VLA compressor. And this would conclude my test for this rifle, which leads up to our conclusions. Shorter in stature, but not shorter on stats. Lesser in length, but not in quality. The G&G Armament 308 SBR series is sure to do people well. The shortcomings are very few in between, and performance is admiring. The gearbox is oddly quiet and smooth, and looks are of course lovely. I think it's safe to say that I like this rifle. I'm just happy to say that nothing ruined it for me. Ambidextrous controls, its high grades on the field, its gearbox design, and its quirks may impress me, but will that make it all worth it when looking at its borderline $400 price tag? That's what it ultimately comes down to. It doesn't matter what I say now, but what do you think? Is this another home run for G&G? Or is this another wave in the ocean that is sure to be forgotten? I hope you enjoyed this review over the G&G Armament 308 Mk.1 SBR. I had a lot of fun filming it, writing it, and putting it together, even though it took me several weeks to make sure I was happy with it. I think this rifle can take care of that itch for another 308 rifle stand-in, but that may be just my opinion, since I think AR-10s are a really cool concept. 308 rifles are just too good looking. The positives this rifle totes around far outweigh the cons. I will admit that the magazine compatibility may hamper some interest, but ask whatever questions you may have in the comments or just tell me what you thought about this rifle. I'll do my best to answer those questions or just to chat with you guys. I'd like to thank G&G Armament for working with me once again, since without them, there wouldn't be a review in the first place. Check them out with the links down below in the description, and soon I'll add an Airsoft GI link once they start stocking this rifle. I'd also like to thank the channel members that directly support this channel. They knew this video was coming out before anyone else, and Tier 2 members even got to watch it before anyone else did. And you can too by becoming a member. Just click on this tab on the USAirsoft homepage if you're interested. So shoutouts to Easy Zandy, Sir Triss, Kiwi Spartan, Lone Star, Cirque du Noé, F4R Kalash, Western Gilbert, and William Temple. Seriously, thank you all for your contributions. But until that next video drops from the city of San Antonio, this has been Scott Hollenbeck, and I will be sure to see you all next time.
One in the red building, my front. Cross the front.
You're killing it.
Oh, I'm feeling it. I'm trying hard. Already hit?
No, I'm not hit.
Alright, where's that?
4 people hit straight ahead. There's a guy hit right there.
Where's she hit? Oh, my bad, my bad. Sorry.
Yeah, I say we push all the way that way and then push from behind.
Alright.
There's someone straight ahead.
Woo! Gun hit! Oh.
Avert your eyes now if you don't like seeing trigger feathering. I just want to prove how tight this trigger is. Pretty good. A nice pro to having the extended magazine follower is no BBs are wasted at all in between the HopUp and the actual magazine. So I have loaded about only 4 or 5 rounds in this magazine, and once it's empty, then you'll see nothing fall out. It'll be completely clear and empty like it should be. So now it's empty. The rifle will not allow me to dry fire at all. Take out the magazine. Nothing fell out at all. Extended magazine follower is out. And it still won't let me to fire unless I shove my finger in here. And there you go.
I've always liked G&G anyways. They've always been really, I started out with one. Always been really smooth, reliable guns.